Good afternoon and welcome. I see a few of you have come into the Zoom presentation for this afternoon. I'm Kurt Witcher, manager at the Genealogy Center here at the Allen County Public Library in Fort Wayne, Indiana. It's a very snowy Saturday afternoon here in Fort Wayne, so I hope the weather is a little warmer and a little more sunny where you are at. But it's a pleasure, distinct pleasure to have you joining us for the second part of a program we offered during Family History Month last month in October. I think it's going to be a really engaging and exciting program of sources and techniques for African American research. Our plan for this afternoon is to go through some really consequential types of records, three or four of them, with some nice examples. We'll have some great explanation. We have a really expert in DNA and DNA results in African American genealogy with one of our local African American Genealogical Society members. So we'll work through 3, 4, 5 different types of sources, and then we'll open it up for questions, and we'll try to get to as many of those questions as we possibly can. So again, welcome. We're just really pleased that you're joining us this afternoon. Okay, I think we're pretty close to the top of the hour. We've waited about another minute for people to come and join us. We're so pleased that there's over 24, 25 individuals already joining us today. So it's really an exciting time. So we're about ready to kick this off. So I am going to introduce our main presenter for this afternoon. Roberta Ridley is the chairwoman for the African American Genealogy Society of Fort Wayne. She is the founding chairperson of that society. She has helped many, many individuals find their family stories. She has a program on our local cable access every month, Ancestors and Answers. She's really, really engaged in helping individuals find their family stories. So it's with great pleasure that I introduce to you, Roberta Ridley. Roberta?
Good afternoon. Thank you so much, Kurt, for that very flowery introduction. I hardly recognized who I was then. To everyone that is joining us at this time for today's presentation, I thank you as well for carving out time in your wonderful day to join us, and hopefully to also discover things that you need to continue on your path of discovering the rest of who you are. In our society, we use a term that is on our actual training booklet. You are your own cold case, and that is a fact. And I hope that you will embrace the idea of looking into yourself as an investigation to discover the rest of yourself with every step that you take on this learning path. So today we, by popular demand, I have to say that we're actually doing a part 2 of best sources and technology and techniques, in African American research. This is probably could also be a 3, but we're not going to promise anything like that. There's a lot of information that all of us need. No matter how much research I have done, I am continually learning something new, different, discovering another record set or someone else that I need to talk to. And I'm quite sure that that fact is true for you as well. So I'm going to talk about quite a few things today. I'm going to mention some things that I didn't even plan to, but opportunity is opportunity. And if I can share anything with anybody that will help them turn a corner or understand something about themselves, I hope that I do so. I'm going to start off today with obituaries. And I could do a lot of examples. I could show you a lot of images, but the most important thing for you to know is that you need them. You need them from whatever source you can glean them from, and you need to go through them very carefully. Of course, there are times and there are time periods that make it difficult to acquire an official obituary. But sometimes what you're looking for is not exactly what you think. And so we know that there's a time period where African-American people did not volunteer the information, nor was it gleaned from the actual death of a person, be it a fatality or it be natural causes. It didn't exactly hit the newspaper, particularly in southern areas of our country. Also, there is the fact that obituaries were often a item that would show up in county newspapers where there are collective counties coming together in a county publication. So if you're looking for the obituary to show up in the hometown, village, community that your ancestors have come from, and you're not finding it, or there was no newspaper per se on a regular publication, it show up in a county newspaper. So cast the net, let it go, let it spread wide, and start looking in the counties in and around where your ancestors resided to glean that newspaper. Now, in addition to that, there are the obituaries that are produced for the actual church service. And that still also goes back quite a ways. You want to look into your church, the church of record that the ancestor belonged to see what type of obituary records the church is holding. And beyond the church, perhaps information that has been sent in to the district that church was involved with. So district records for the AME church, for the CME church, for the Southern Baptist church, that type of thing. So you want to just look hard to try to come up with the obituary, because the key thing is that obituaries actually list names of people in other areas of the country, or they list names that perhaps never even were talked about with the family normally. So I want to emphasize that part, and we got so much to talk about that I don't really want to make it about obituaries, okay? So that being said, if you have questions or comments to that end, as it has been stated, you please put them in the chat, and if there's specifics as that is related to those obituaries and searching and difficulties that you may have, perhaps we'll be able to direct you. Next, we're going to look at a collection that is here at the Allen County. And I wanted, before I leave, I almost forgot, I had it right in my face too. As far as the obituaries are concerned, here at the Allen County Public Library, we have begun a great work as far as African-American obituaries are concerned. And you can go to the Allen County Public Library Genealogy Department and look up obituaries, African-American obituaries that are kept in an alphabetical order. And it does cover a large amount of, a large block of time as far as those obituaries are concerned. And we're continuously acquiring obituaries from individuals within the community as well as outside of our community to build this database. And with that being said, I would like for Kurt to share with you the actual collection itself and those who are contributing from other places. Kurt?
Sure, absolutely, Roberta. You really did a nice job emphasizing that. Not only are, as you said, the newspaper obituaries so important, but those church obituaries or memorial programs are just chock, as you know, chock full of information about our deceased ancestors, our deceased relatives. So your words of wisdom as far as read through them thoroughly, because there's just so much information in there. What you mentioned, Roberta, is true. We, through the generosity of our local African-American Historical Society and African-American Genealogical Society, and some key players like Roberta and Adrian Wells and Hannah Stiff, God rest her soul, our friends at the Indiana Genealogy Interest Group, Indiana African American Genealogy Interest Group in Indianapolis, our friends in Cleveland, Ohio. We have collected literally tens of thousands of African American obituaries and homegoing memorial programs. I just wanted, as Roberta asked me to, just share my screen for a moment, just to show you one example from our friends over in the Cleveland area. Notice this is a memorial program here. My cursor is kind of going under this little line here that says page 1 through page 7. So this one memorial has 7 pages of information. It's truly amazing to be able to look at that. If we click on page 2, we get a nice greeting literature, sometimes poetry, sometimes songs, the order of the service of the individual, more, the obituary, pallbearers, pretty amazing. Here's the actual obituary itself. Look at all the information. As you said, Roberta, look at all the information in that obituary, the conclusion of the obituary, a psalm, and then the funeral home, interment, where you can seek further information. So we have, again, tens of thousands of them on our homepage. You can find them by querying one of our staff members. You can find them by searching under search our free databases right up here. You can go to Allen County, you can go to Indiana, you can go to other states. If I might, Roberta, just remind our colleagues that are listening in, there are a number of states that actually have started programs like this. In Georgia, the Georgia State Memory Program has an amazing collection of homegoing programs, obituaries, memorials for African Americans. Ours happens to be larger, but there's still many thousands that really aren't discoverable anywhere else. So we know as good researchers to go try to find those information materials wherever we can.
Thank you, Kurt. And I want to emphasize that we started this a long time ago, and there have been some good followers, and they will probably glean a lot more just based on how they have seen the benefit of these items, these obituaries, towards genealogy research. I want to take this opportunity to encourage all of you who are viewing and listening to the program today. If you have a personal collection of obituaries and you know that there are people in other states that perhaps maybe weren't able to attend the funeral, maybe curious, maybe doing research just like you, and for your own benefit, if you were to donate these obituaries to the collection, then they can be accessible by others around the country, therefore leading more of us to connect based on the information that's shared from those obituaries. So put together a nice little package, send it to Allen County Public Library, see if that's something that you can start in your own community, whereupon it will be accessible online to the rest of us around the country. But it is a very, very useful tool when it comes down to doing the genealogy research that we all do so ferociously. So now I almost got ahead of myself, and I apologize for that. But we're going to go on into Mr. Warfield, the Warfield Diaries. William Warfield. William Warfield was a local African-American entrepreneur, community activist. He was also a playwright and a songwriter, and included a lot of information in his diaries about the people that came through Fort Wayne into his bed and breakfast facility. And he also talks about railroad people who came and stayed at his facility, traveling from the East Coast, headed west, sometimes even south, based on the railroad that they were traveling on. And he does a day-to-day entry in his diary where he talks about the exchanges of individuals that he deals with on a daily basis. The really cool part about his diary is that he doesn't just talk about African Americans. He talks about African Americans and their community experiences, exchanges within the overall community, as well as talking about military, political issues that are concerned, business growth, medical situations, people who are starting businesses as they come into the community, his community reach, people he's helped to get established in business, people who helped him in business as well. A page from William Warfield's diary, whereupon your ancestor may have been mentioned or that would enlighten you about the community here, is something that you really don't want to miss. And the fact that those diaries were donated to the Allen County Public Library Genealogy Department, they have been scanned and put into a database where you can read them at your leisure to review information that might give you a clue or give you some understanding about the community. And Kurt also had an example of that for us because, again, I want to reiterate, it's notes on family, business, travel, community, politics. It's just about anything you could think of. And if you have people that are traveling from east to west and coming through this way, especially by train, they could easily have ended up in one of the rooms at his facility. Kurt?
Yeah, a great explanation. It really is a treasure trove, Roberta, of amazing information. As sometimes happens, the gods of technology don't look kindly upon us when we're doing presentations. I did want to show you, it's in, as Roberta articulated, it's in the Allen County Public Library's digital collections, and you can see here's a William Warfield diary, another one over here, and 3 more down here. Right now, the diaries are not loading, so there must be a network challenge. Usually when you click on a diary, it will begin to load and nothing is loading. However, I apologize for that, but this is freely available on the Genealogy Center's website, actually on the Genealogy Center and the library's website. So this evening, later this afternoon, maybe in the wee hours of Sunday morning, if you go to genealogycenter.org and then look under Allen County Resources, you will find a link to the William Warfield diaries, and it will come up to a page like this where you get to choose the date that you're interested in, and you click on it and you can literally read the diary online. And as Roberta said, it's really extraordinary in the amount of detail of this very, very successful businessman navigating a Jim Crow society in a community that was very segregated at that time. Amazing amounts of information, names, what people were doing, who stayed at his boarding houses and beds and breakfasts. So really a great site. As you can see, the network still is not cooperating. So we'll stop my screen share now, but it is a great source, as you said, Roberta. So if you want to take advantage of exploring that, just come back to genealogycenter.org, free databases under Allen County.
Thank you, Kurt. And as you mentioned, we never know when the demons of technology will rear their head. But I do want to encourage everyone to do that. And particularly if you have relatives in the area during the time period of the diaries, is well worth a look and see if your ancestors have been mentioned and in what capacity they were mentioned. And I mention it also because I wonder how many of you in your communities have a person within the community, and we are particularly talking about African-American genealogy. So an African-American person in your community who was an activist, who was an entrepreneur, who made a difference in many people's lives. What is their story? What documentation do they have? Did they have a journal? Did they have a diary? Have you looked into it to see if it exists? Has it been preserved? And can you go through that document to discover information about your family, or exactly how and what this individual was actually involved in your community? Maybe it's in the cedar chest, in the attic of the home of the person you least expect. So I encourage you to take a look into those types of things and to see if such an item exists and to have it preserved and made available so that it can assist others in their research and possibly even you. So that's the Warfield Diaries, day-to-day African-American life, okay? We're doing some highlights. This is basics in terms of the best sources for you to get additional information, and also in terms of out of the box, okay? The next thing that we're going to talk about ever so briefly is what the ancillary census information. I know that we've talked about them on other programs and possibly touched on it the last time as well, but I want to remind people about the other census records that are available for you to research and possibly discover a missing person from the regular federal census that you have not been able to find. There is, of course, state censuses. And then there's one referred to as a 3D, which is dependent, delinquent, and disabled census. Individuals who may have been institutionalized for a variety of physical, mental, medical reasons. And they are recorded as far as censuses are concerned. If you have not considered looking in them because you can't find somebody that you know should have been there as far as your family is concerned, it's not a bad move to investigate those records and see if you're finding them. Manufacturing, people who are in business and have certain individuals working for them and performing various tasks where your ancestors may be mentioned there, as well as agricultural and mortality census. And of course, slave census, the slave schedules that list the owners primarily, and by majority, the owner, and it lists male, female, by age, and if whether or not they are Black, white, or mulatto. And yes, I said Black, white, or mulatto. You will be amazed to find the categories of all of those individuals being listed in the slave schedules, depending on what their, their position in life was at the time. Take a look and you may find a lead to those individuals that you're looking for. There are also railroad census, individuals who worked for the railroad and the records that the railroad kept for individuals who were employed with the railroad, and truckers. Questions to that end, please take advantage of the chat room. And this is a reminder to you because I know we've talked about them before, okay? Without further delay, there is another capacity that I would like to revisit today in terms of best sources and technologies, because always there's an out-of-the-box twist to things. Approximately 5, 6 years ago, there was a presentation that I did for an awesome organization, MAGGI, for those who are not familiar, that's the Midwest African American Genealogy Institute. And I've done a few presentations over time that I embrace for the diversity, the quality, and the variety in every way, shape, and form of what goes into doing the research for a client that I may have. And it so happens that the client that I had at that particular time was a lovely woman by the name of Camellia Kearns Grant, who had the opportunity to talk to me about genealogy and had questions. Some of them were not as firm as others, but she also shared with me that she knew that she was adopted. And it creates a different search for anybody that is adopted or raised outside of their natural biological parents' homes. But there's so many different things to turn, pages to turn, holes to dig in and doors to open, that sort of thing. And I've asked Camelia to join us today and to share a little bit of her voyage in her genealogy research, the things that turned information into, shall I say, suspected information into realities for her. And it's also out of the box for most people when it comes down to doing that research. And so if you'll welcome to the screen with me this afternoon, Camelia Kearns Grant.
You, Roberta Ridley. Kurt, thank you for having me here today. My name is Camelia Kearns Grant, and I am a member and the treasurer of the African American Genealogy Society here in Portland, Indiana.
We have a way of being able to capture people like that. You know, once we get them involved to a certain extent, then they have a job to do with the society. And so that's a note you might want to make for other societies out there. Okay. I know that we've talked about so much, so much over the years and that went into the research. I just said, I told everyone that you knew from a young age that you were adopted, and we never really like to refer to it a lot because she was raised in a very loving home where mom was mom and dad was dad, and that's just the way it was. But at a certain point in time, one has questions. And I want you to share with our listening audience out there, maybe what was some of the most pressing questions you had that caused you to do your genealogy research?
Long story short, I knew who my birth mother was, biological mother, but I had so many questions about her mother. Who was she? Where was she? I'm a grandmother, and I know how much I love my grandkids, and I can't imagine them not being a part of my life. So I wanted to know, where was my maternal grandmother? Was she alive? Why did she allow me to be adopted? I wanted to know about her life and her journey, and I wanted to know where she came from. And that is when I reached out to Roberta. I wanted her to help me find out if my grandmother was still alive. Even though she would be in her 90s, there was a possibility, and I still had that hope. And that is where our journey began. And Roberta did find my grandmother, who was deceased. But what we also found out about her was that she was born in 1922, and her mother was born in 1924. And sadly, her mother, which would be my great-grandmother, passed away in 1928 from meningitis in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And at that time, my grandmother was only 6 years old. It's important to say that my grandmother's parents were separated at the time. And instead of going to be with her father when her mother died at the age of 6, she goes to live with her mother's mother and father, her grandparents. They're all in the same community. And sadly, her grandfather ends up passing away in 1934 from tuberculosis. This makes my grandmother now 12 years old. And so she loses her mother at the age of 6 from meningitis unexpectedly. At the age of 12, she loses her grandfather from tuberculosis. He had only been sick a short period of time. And then her grandmother, who is raising her, is crossing the street downtown Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and is struck by a truck and killed instantly. And that happens in 1938. And my grandmother is now 16. You talk about tragedy. And at the age of 16, she goes to live with her, I want to say almost estranged father,
It was.
you know. And at the very young age of 18, she's been pregnant with my, as I used to refer to her, my birth mother. And I wanted to know about her history. And that journey took me and Roberta to Milwaukee, Wisconsin, where we had been on the phone for countless days, weeks, hours, making calls and appointments to people to let them know that we were coming to Milwaukee, Wisconsin. We ended up at the cemetery where they were waiting for us. They took us to every one of my grandparents, great-grandparents, aunts, and uncles' grave sites, which was very saddening. A lot of them, most of them did not have headstones. And because this happened in the 1920s and 30s, they were buried in an old section of the cemetery that would just flood, and we walked through a foot of water, which I have videotapes of us doing. We thought the car was going to sink down into the mud. We also drove the neighborhood to each and every address where they lived, even though now those addresses are something else. Different places, police stations. We went to all those areas and all those neighborhoods to look and see what was around. We also had a meeting with a wonderful gentleman by the name of Carlton Benson, who is the director at the Wisconsin Black Historical Museum. And though it's only open, or was open then, for like personal tours, he took us in and gave us a tour and a major history lesson in the area of Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And what I urge people to do is to go to these places, reach out to businesses, even if museums, archive centers may not be open to the public, someone is in charge. And there we gained a wealth of information that is just unbelievable. Books that back from like the 1915 through 1945 that people wrote on the area. So in those type of little like books, you'll find probably your own family. Wow. He also took us to the Milwaukee, Wisconsin depository, and where we had to go in, show our driver's license, put on white gloves. We were behind locked doors, and they pulled out ancient documents to help me find if any of my relatives were mentioned in any of those books.
I want to emphasize at this point, and thank you, Camelia, for that. And it really is a brief synopsis of some of the things that were done. But my point in sharing Camelia's search, her story, it was so out of the box in the sense that there were, and please make note of these things, there were medical records, court records, coroner records. There was Board of Health information that was gleaned from a hospital that had been closed for eons, certainly back to when the birth of, 1920.
Well, my great-grandfather that passed away from tuberculosis was in a
Sanitarium,
yes,
yes.
which is now a medical school in Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
That's right.
But all of hospitals have records that date back 100 years ago. You can't just walk in there and get them. However, you can walk in, ask for a form, fill out the form. It's going to take weeks, but that information can be given to you if they can locate it.
Out of the box, because it's also a source for some birth records as well as death. Thank you, Camille. I wanted to throw that out there somewhat as a teaser to individuals that are adopted, that are looking for information about their birth parents or other information that may have be connected to death as far as those original parents are concerned. That was a story share, and I hope that you'll glean something from it or even have a question about it that we can respond to, that may help someone out there that has a challenge as far as that is concerned. I always wish there's more time, but I'm going to give what time we do have has to go to my esteemed colleague, my ride or die, my Adrian Wells, my historian. For those of you who are out there that get him on the Friday night chats and the different Zooms around the country, I'm jealous that I'm sharing him with you because he is a silent weapon here with the African American Genealogical Society of Fort Wayne. And ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to have Mr. Adrian Wells share with you some DNA conversation. Adrian Wells, thank you.
So today I want to talk about DNA, because DNA is something that I believe that every genealogist or should have in their genealogical toolbox, because it can be instrumental in helping you along the way. And so I know when I speak to a lot of people, they ask me, so if I get my DNA done, what is it going to tell me? So we're going to discuss what your DNA results will tell you. So the number one reason why a lot of people get the DNA test is that they want the ethnicity results. So that's why they want to see if they're Indian or how much African they may have. But with the ethnicity estimate, is something that you should take with a grain of salt, because that's just what it is, an estimate, because it can change over time. I tested in 2017 and my estimate has changed several times. So you just want to take that with a grain of salt. Like on the screen, you'll see 3 different ethnicity estimates from 3 different companies: Ancestry, MyHeritage, and 23andMe. And you can see the difference in the percentages and the ethnicity. And then also, it's your DNA is going to tell you who you're related to in the form of your DNA matches. And so you're going to get a match list. So it's going to list all the people who share DNA with you. And the list is going to start with your highest match down to your lowest match according to how many centimorgans you share. And your matches are broken down into categories according to the amount of DNA that you share. And you'll see, so you're going to have your parent, child, your sibling, your close relationships, which is going to be your half siblings, your niece, nephew, grandparents, aunts, uncles, first cousins, second cousins, and then your extended relationships, which is going to be your third cousins to fourth cousin, and distant family is going to be fourth cousins and beyond. And one thing that we need to take into consideration too, that it's not going to tell you if the match is a removed generation. For example, if they're a first cousin once removed or a fourth cousin 2 times removed. And so that's why we need to understand the cousin relationships. And so here's just a snapshot of my match list, starting with my highest match down. So you'll see you have the parent-child category, then your close family. And then also your DNA results is you're going to be able to connect with relatives that you may have lost contact with, or relatives you did not know you had. Like in the case of our esteemed chairwoman, I discovered that she's connected to us somehow, my family somehow. I don't know how, but she is, as you can see on the screen. There are several, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 of my family members that she shares DNA with. Although we don't share DNA, but she shares DNA with my mom, my niece, my first cousin, my uncle, and 3 first cousins once removed. So we're still working on trying to figure out how we're connected, but that's some of the things that you can find out with this DNA, that you connected to people you didn't know you was connected to. And then so a tool that I believe every genealogist, when dealing with DNA, should have in their toolbox too, is this cousin chart, or sometimes it's called the cousin calculator, because it's going to help you when you're looking through your match list to figure out how these different matches are relating to you. And another tool that I use when I'm dealing with DNA is DNA Painter. And over there, they have the shared Centimorgan project, which was created by Blaine Bettinger. And so here when you input the amount of centimorgans shared with the match, it gives you the percentage of probability of the relationship. So this is another tool that I use quite often. I was just using it last night to help when I was helping someone. But so here's just an example. This is my Andrea Wells. She's my first cousin. And so we share 1,101 centimorgans of DNA. So I know that she's my first cousin because she's a known relative. But say if you got a DNA match, you were sharing this much DNA with them, but you didn't know who they were. So if you go over to DNA Painter to the shared Centimorgan project, you can input the amount of DNA you're sharing. It's going to give you the probability of what a relationship this DNA match could be. So here you see it says that there's a 98 probability that this person could be a great grandparent, great aunt or uncle, half aunt or uncle, first cousin, half niece or nephew, great niece or nephew, or great grandchild. And I already know that she's my first cousin, but there's a lot of different relationships that a person sharing this much DNA could have with you. So, and then again, on your match list, you're going to get the matches, but they're only going to give you a predicted relationship. And so when I first got my match list, I'm like, well, that's some of my known relatives. I'm like, well, that's not the correct relationship. And so this is Margaret Gundy Johnson, God rest her soul. But we share 55 centimorgans of DNA. And so they're giving us predicted relationship of 4th to 6th cousin. So I go over to the shared Centimorgan project and I input the 55 in. It gives me all these different relationships that it could be. But I know that Margaret G is my second cousin 2 times removed, but it's telling me that there's a 19% chance that, that she could be a second cousin twice removed. And that's in fact what she is. So, and then again, that cousin chart, I use this a lot in my research and trying to find connections. So this is just basically at the top left corner, you'll see the common ancestor, which is Charles Eaglin. And then you go across the screen and you'll see how Margaret G is descending from Charles Eaglin. And going down the left-hand side, you'll see how I'm descending from Charles Eaglin. So if you go down to me, which is number 5, and go across to Margaret G, you'll see that we're second cousins twice removed. So that's how I use the cousin chart to confirm the relationships. And then another thing that you will get on your match list is you'll get common ancestor hints, providing that you and the match both have a tree and you have the same people in your tree. So here with my cousin Andrea, it's telling us that we have a common ancestor hint, which is Martin Thomas Wells and Marilyn Joy Mudd. And I know that that's our common ancestor because that's our grandparents. But if you click on view the relationship on either one of these, it's going to take you to this page and it's going to say relationships to Andrea Wells. You may be related to Andrea Wells through Marilyn Joy Mudd. And so it shows us how we could possibly be related. So it's saying that it's coming down from Marilyn, going down to Kathleen Wells and Andre Wells, and then to Kathleen to Adrian, then Andre to Andrea. So I know that is in fact how we're connecting because she's my first cousin. But this is connected to the through lines, which is on Ancestry. So we'll show you those who may be related to a particular person per their family tree, providing, and that's what through lines is based off of, family trees. Because some people don't like through lines, but I love using it because I've had success with it. And then another thing I like to use when dealing with my DNA matches is searching for specific birth locations. So on your match list, you can search by birth locations. So I put Fort Wayne, Indiana. It's going to give you all your matches that have someone in their tree with the birth location of Fort Wayne. And then you can search by surnames. And I use this a lot. And so you can search for surnames. So I'm searching for Mudd. and it'll give you all the DNA matches who have mud in their family trees. And then ways to put your DNA results to work. And I put my DNA to work. So DNA can be used to confirm your research, which I have used it to confirm, and it can be used to break down through a brick wall. And DNA can help with like adoption situations and MPE situations, which is not parent expected. So I'm going to talk about how I broke through a brick wall using DNA. So some people may say, well, brick wall, what's a brick wall? So it's a tough research problem. A parent dead ends that after many hours of searching still yield no answers. And so that's what I had. I had a brick wall because I was searching for my great grandmother's, trying to find out who her mother was, and I could not get any headway. So that's what it is. And so you just want to ask yourself a question. What is it that you're trying to find out? So it's just ask a research question, just a question of what you're trying to find out informs the basis of your research. So example, who was Betty Jones's mother? So I'm trying to find out who was Emma Cadwell's mother. And so you just ask yourself those questions. And then once you establish a research question, then you will try to answer it. So you want to start with what you already know. You want to write it down. You want to develop a research plan and create a timeline. And timelines is another thing that you want to put in your genealogical toolbox, because it's going to help you in the long run. Because when I first started, I didn't do timelines. I was repeating research I'd already done, and because I didn't have no timeline, I was wasting time. So it just helps you stay organized, keep you from repeating research, lets you see what you already know, and then your next steps. And I use Dr. Shelley Murphy, the family tree girl, the timeline format that she developed. That's the one I use. So my brick wall is who is Emma Grizel Cadwell's mother? I wanted to know who her mother was. So what I knew her name was Emma Grizel or Grizella Cadwell. She was born, according to census data, about 1882 in Georgia. And from oral history, I know her father was Martin Thomas Cadwell and has been confirmed through DNA. And from oral history, we are Cadwell Birch. And I know she married Henry Wells. And then Cadwell oral history states that her father was Martin Thomas Cadwell. He married twice. His first wife was Lilia D. Long, D. Young, D. something. People they didn't know. And this union produced 2 children, Emma and a son, Gordon. Then he then married Mary Curry. And then the Wells oral history states that Emma's mother was a woman named Ophelia, and she was a Cherokee Indian. So when I did my traditional research, I found Emma and Henry's marriage record. And they were married in 1903 in Lawrence County, Georgia. And then I found them in the census. So here they are in the 1910 census. And so here we have Henry, Grizella, then you have Martin, then you have Lilia, then you have Alice and Sophie and Gladys. And one thing I want to bring to your attention is that you want to pay attention to naming patterns, because this will help you also in your research. Because if you look at the children in this household, Martin, which is my grandfather, his name is Martin Thomas Wells, and he was named after his grandfather, Martin Thomas Cadwell. And then Alice, she is named after Henry's mother, Alice Mormon. And then we have this daughter, Lilia. So, but we'll get to that in a minute. But you want to pay attention to those naming patterns because it'll help you in your research. So in your match list, you want to look for a few things: surnames that repeat, locations that repeat, and these are clues to find a connection to matches and migration patterns. And when I was searching for Emma, I could not find anything that would give me who her mother was, and I couldn't find a death record, anything. So that's when I turned to DNA. So now we're going to talk about how we use this DNA. So in my match list, I had these 2 DNA matches that I looked at, this JH and this AHJ. I was matching them, and then my mother, she was matching them also. So both of them had trees. So I was looking at their trees, and I was like, wait a minute. Okay, they both have the same person in their tree, this Lumbia Yonks. And then AHJ has a Lumbia or Lumbee Birch, which is basically the same person. So I'm like, okay. And then so I would continue looking through my DNA match list, and then there was the AH, and she also had Lumbia Birch, and she was matching me, my mom, my niece, and my uncle. So I'm like, so And then my mom and my niece were matching her son, which is LH. And again, there's this Lumbia Birch again. So I asked myself, well, who is this Lumbia Birch? Because she's showing up in all these DNA matches. And there's some other DNA matches that she showed up in. So I'm like, well, who is this Lumbia? So I went and started searching for this Lumbia Birch or Lumbia Birch. And so I find the 1870 census. So looking at the 1870 census, I found Lumba with parents Jay Yonks and Katie. In this census, I also discovered that she had a sister named Lillard. And so I asked myself the question, could Lillard also be Lilia? And then but then also when I was looking at this 1870, I started looking at the census. I was like, wait a minute, that's Grandpa Grip Cadwell up there at the top on the same page as Jordan and Katie. And I was like, okay, so we want to make sure that when we're researching, we're using the fan club method, which we're researching these friends and family associates and neighbors, because that's clues to what is what. Because up there we have Martin Cadwell with his parents, and then you have down here you have this Birch family. So is there a connection to these two families? So I then go to the 1880 census. And so now the J Yonks, which I know is Jordan Yonks or Birch, and he's now gone. And Katie, she's listed as being, she's listed as being a widow. So that left me with the question, so when did Jordan die, since she's listed as widow? And Lumbia is not listed in the household because she's now married. And now Lillard now becomes Lilia. So I asked myself that question, when did Jordan die? So I did a detour and started researching Jordan. And so I researched him to see if I could find a death record for him. But I didn't find a death record, but I stumbled upon this 1900 census. So I asked my question, when did Jordan die, or did he die? Because here I'm seeing this Jordan J. D. Yonks in this household of Henry Clark as his stepfather. So I'm like, well, and he's listed as widow because his second wife had died also. So I'm like, okay, but pay attention to that D. Yonks name. So I find the marriage record for Jordan D. Yonks and Retta Clark. They were married in 1879 in Lawrence County, Georgia. And then also in this marriage record, I looked down on the minister who performed the marriage, and there was Grandpa Grip Cadwell, my third great grandfather Grip Cadwell, Emma's grandfather, who performed the ceremony. So you want to look at these, look at these records because it's going to give you clues to different things. And then the light bulb went off my head. I said, wait a minute. Because Cadwell oral history said that Emma's mother was Lilia D. Young or D something. And also that she had a son named Gordon. So I'm like, wait a minute, D. Yonks. That's probably what they were trying to say, was D. Yonks, that her father was, that Lilia was a D. Yonks. So then I switched my focus on to Lilia to see what was up with Lilia. So I found Lilia in the 1900 census. She's in Pickering, Coffee County, Georgia, and she's in the household with her husband, Ander. In this census, he's Ander Birch, and then there's Lilia Birch, and then they have a son in the household of Bolton Birch, and there's a Wesley, a Henry, and a Joe Birch. So according to the census, Lilia and Andy have been married for 10 years. So I go to the 1910 census, and now Ander is now Andrew. And so there's Lilia. And in this census, it tells you that Lilia was married twice. They have been married for 16 years, and she was the mother of 12 children, and only 9 were living. And then Golden now becomes Gordon. So I was like, all right. Okay. So then I go back to my trusty cousin calculator that I said that you need to put in your toolkit. And so since I kind of stick that Lilia and Lumbia were siblings, so I said, well, is this Lilia my Lilia? So I inputted Lumbia and Lilia into this cousin chart, and I brought it over to AH, which she was the highest DNA match that we had, that my mom had. She shared the most with my mom, which is 148 centimorgans of DNA. So I used her as the target. So I inputted them in here. And so I go across to my mom and AH, they would be second cousin once removed, and AH would be a second cousin twice removed to me. And then so I go back over to the shared CM project and input the 148, and it says 54% probability that a person with this amount of DNA could be a half second cousin once removed, half first cousin, second removed, or first cousin 3 times removed. So that confirmed, according to the cousin chart, AH to my mom is a second cousin once removed. Then on the right is me, and a second cousin 2 times removed. It's 9% probability. So I was able to confirm, the relationship using these 2 tools. And then again, the through lines come in. So I go to Katie Birch's through line, and it gives me a run across of Katie's kids and the DNA matches that are descending from Katie. So you'll see we have DNA matches from her son, Washington. Then you have Lumbia, and then you have Lilia, which is another daughter that I descend from. Then you have Sarah Birch, which was another daughter. So we have DNA matches from all of Katie's, her children. And then here is Lumbia, Katie Birch, and then it just shows you the breakdown of the descent. And then when I mentioned the JH and the AHJ, so they descend from Claire White, Lumbia's daughter, Claire White. So there were some more DNA matches that descend from that line. So I was able to confirm that Emma's mother was Lilia DeYonks or Birch, because they all came off the Birch plantation. And I think our time is wrapping up, so I'm going to end right there.
The oars were in the water. It was almost like going upstream. I'm not sure, but it was fast and furious and informative. I hope that was a lot and enough to get enough people looking back at their DNA and how they can use it to try to figure out relationships that they don't understand. You got that chat out there. You can always send Adrian a question about what you have, what you're looking at, and what suggestions he may have to help you with the information. A lot of people get their DNA results, and that's all they do. They get them. They don't do anything with them. They don't try to figure out who they're related to. They don't figure out how do they find out who else they're related to, and to figure out who is trying to connect with them. This has been awesome. It's a lot to try to squeeze into an hour, and I know we probably zoomed overhead. I hope that we shared some things that was really useful to you, or that will bring you to the table to say, can we talk about this, that, or whatever? Let us know. And my name is, again, Roberta Ridley, Chairwoman of the African American Genealogical Society of Fort Wayne. And I thank you for allowing me to come into your homes or offices to share what we hope would be good information to keep you on the path of your genealogy search of who you are. Kurt?
Thank you so much, Roberta, and thanks too to Adrian. We have one question that's in the Q&A, and the question was, how old do obituaries have to be to donate? There isn't any age limit or age restriction to donating obituaries. They can be from yesterday or from 100 years ago. It's a great question to ask because we do have to be careful of copyright issues, etc. But usually the obituary is such a small percentage of the newspaper that you don't have to be concerned about that. The memorial programs, the church obituaries, are pretty amazing and can be easily shared by the family members, by cousins, by the churches, by the funeral homes themselves. So another really, really great question. I was listening to Adrian and listening to you, Roberta, and I was continuing to try different ways of seeing if I could show a page from the Warfield Diary. And I actually got one to come up. So I just want to share my screen again real quickly, just to show that you and I weren't making this up. These are amazing diaries. This is the 1922 diary, March through May of 22. And you can see, as Roberta, as you mentioned, There's individuals listed here. He's making a reference in the second half of this page, a young Jewish man by the name of this particular name right here, called to see about leasing his Calhoun Street building. So it told you one of William Warfield's buildings, who was interested in it. And as you said, Roberta, it's just chock full of information about whom William Warfield interacted with and the community. So it's pretty amazing.
Yeah. Thanks. Thanks for pursuing that, Kurt. And most of the writing is easily read, even though we know that period writing can be very challenging. But he seems to have taken a great pride in writing things so that it was legible. Just as a quick notice, one of the things on that page that I honed in was his mention of Mrs. Peltier, and Mrs. Peltier being the spouse of a mortuary here in Fort Wayne, Peltier's mortuary, and an individual that also handled African-American funerals and burials prior to there being an African-American mortuary in the community. So that's those are the kind of things that you find out going through a book like that. Thank you, Kurt. Thank you so much.
And you're so right, Roberta, to look for all those clues and all the names and things that can lead you from one record to another, kind of another form of out of the box. So thank you so much, Roberta and Adrian and Camelia, for your time today. And thank all of you for joining us. We are just a little bit over time, but that's quite all right. I hope that you will watch the African-American Genealogical Society of Fort Wayne's Facebook page, the Genealogy Center's Facebook page, web page. Both organizations have a lot to offer for those who are interested in African-American research. Again, Roberta has a monthly show on our Access Fort Wayne TV channel, so that's well worth watching as well. So until next time, I'm Kurt Witcher from the Genealogy Center. Have a great day, and thanks again, Roberta.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you, everyone, for joining us.